Welcome to Rich Conversations. This is going to be a spectacular episode. This is a pretty unique one. So we are with pianist Jonathan Hannau in his own space here in Edgewater, Chicago. We're also drinking some coffee. I have my Chicago mug here, thanks to Jonathan. And this is going to be different. This is going to be really fun. We have a baby grand piano behind us. Jonathan is going to play some music for us shortly, and we're just going to talk about music, what he's up to, his creative process, the emotions, and just like everything that goes into it. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here having a conversation.
I love these. I don't know if I'm supposed to say like, thank you for having me, because you have this beautiful space here.
You're too kind.
the first thing I noticed when I walked in was this bookshelf right here.
There's a ton of books, and there's a ton of sheet music over there. We did Suzanne and I are, well, she's a much heavier reader than me, but we like collecting and we like finding trinkets. You see there's a lot of art around the walls. Yeah. I have toy pianos, lots of eccentricities and whatnot.
And we also have a tank.
We do have a turtle tank. Her name is Peg. She's a wonderful little turtle. She might pop in to say hi while I'm playing. Who knows?
Yeah, this is a really cool space. Thanks for having me here.
More than happy.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, you did a really lovely introduction already, so thank you. But yeah, I'm also a composer. I'm a composer and a pianist, primarily at this point in my life. And let's see, what else do I do? I work as a professional musician in the city of Chicago, and I am currently focused more on building a career that is becoming more performance oriented. I mean, I do a lot of collaborations and things like that with musicians around the city already. I do projects, odds and ends, chamber music, all that stuff, as well as I do a lot of solo music in the avant-garde and the contemporary music scene of Chicago. And I've also now started doing more, its genre is called neoclassical, but more minimalist and ambient focused music that kind of stems from my own improvisations, actually, and my own improvisational voice.
Yeah, Jonathan's really good. So, he's very talented. I think I first met Jonathan. So I bartend on the weekends at a place called Lincoln Station. Fantastic spot. And
wonderful bar.
the music school of DePaul, it usually like hangs out there. It's kind of like a lot of musicians.
Where we would go
out.
after concerts.
And Jonathan, I don't even know what year this was, but what I appreciate, two things that I appreciate Jonathan that I haven't told him about. So one is when he comes in, he gets Buffalo Trace with a rock. And I love people that like know what they like, and they like that's their thing.
I try to keep it simple. I'm not complicated.
When I say a rock, it's like a bigger ice cube, so it's kind of fancy.
Yeah. Oh,
so
I like a fancy glass.
And Buffalo Trace is also one of my favorite bourbons. Probably like Few.
Mm-hmm.
Basil Hayden and Buffalo Trace. Those are kind of my
those are all wonderful. You should try the quick tangent, but if you ever find the Few bourbon aged in Scotch barrels, very good.
That sounds adventurous.
Yeah, it's really good actually. Highly if you see the bottle, just pick it up.
Do you ever? Because I imagined, I've never actually started doing this or practiced this, but like in life, like I just want to like calm and just play the piano and just sip some scotch or some bourbon.
I do that.
Do you do that?
I do. When I'm composing, yeah. I like I mean, I know we're going to talk more about this later, I'm sure, but I recently got back from my residency, but when I am composing at the piano, I generally like to have a little glass of scotch or bourbon.
Okay.
To kind of help with the creative process. I don't say like, oh, I'm going to go through this whole bottle. That's a problem. Right. But I do like to have just a tiny bit that I have by my piano, and I'll just take a little sip every now and then, but it keeps me relaxed. And because I use a lot of intuition in my writing, and I use a lot of intuition musically these days. Like that's how I try to, that's my process now, which we will also talk about, I saw. Yes. But yeah, it's a lot of it that just kind of helps me, like what keeps me creative, what keeps me happy. I love tasting bourbons and scotch and learning about them and learning about the differences, the qualities, the characteristics of it. And it's part of that. It's a fun, creative hobby that kind of helps me with music.
Yeah. The second thing, I like that you grew out your hair.
Thank you. It is. I should have done my hair today, and it could have had the wild.
Jonathan's
wild
becoming
mane.
like a rock star pianist, and when he comes into the bar with long hair, he's just like, you're just.
Yep, I'm all for it. I mean, I didn't know that I would like having long hair. There was a point I almost cut it, and then the more I kept going with it, the more I was like, you know what? I think I'm just gonna lean into this more.
Yeah.
Suzanne loves that it's like she's very jealous that it's this beautiful curly hair.
Mm-hmm.
That's not obvious right now, but Suzanne has talked about how much she likes it, and it is a lot of work, but it's kind of become a part of me now. So I'm like, you know what? Yeah. I also just took brand new headshots recently, so I can't cut it now.
That's a great excuse. Like headshots. Oh,
yeah, the headshots are out. I have
the headshots.
It's like at least a year or two.
Yeah.
But thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, I love it because I see like a lot of people I'm around. They're just like they're doing just like awesome things with their lives and their crafts, and they're just like honing everything. And just like seeing the growth and confidence in yourself inspires me, and it's just like
that's what it's about.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's
know?
Community focused, like goal motivation. I love that, and I love being around people who are also doing their thing and like doing it well and working on it. Like I am. Yeah. I like your writing. I like what you do, and you've always been such a wonderful person, and I'm like a very like
I appreciate that.
Cordial and very like easy to get along with, and it's like I love that. Just the general like personalities that I get attracted to, or I'm just like we can have conversations and we can talk about life, and it's just nice, and I think that's part of just being human. It's like that's what we look for, like those relationships.
And then I come into your space and I'm like, okay, can we move that there, that there?
It's all about the aesthetic.
Can I remove this from the outlet? Can I open these blinds?
Hey, it looks good. It's good. Like you got an eye for it. I don't. That's not my thing.
Again, practice.
That's right.
With the craft.
Practice.
But,
everybody practice.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can jump back here and play some music for us real quick. Like
more than
3-4 minutes, 5, whatever you want to do.
I'll share with you one of the pieces that I wrote while I just got back from a residency in Quebec called Orford Musique. And so I was working on an EP. I'll play for you one of the pieces that I wrote
this is
there.
New.
This is brand new, yeah.
Is this the first time anybody's hearing it?
Some people have heard it now.
Okay.
It's been kind of like I've been playing it for friends and stuff like that.
Sure.
It's not out yet though. I have to record it, and we'll talk later about the upcoming EP.
Yeah.
But I'll happily share one of the tracks from it. This one's called One Summer's Evening. And it's got a little bit, if you like Miyazaki films, so Joe Hisaishi, the composer, as well as Jan Tiersen, like those kind of composers are fun for me. It kind of reminds me of that. Okay. It's a waltz. It's like It's a really charming little waltz. So here. It's charming, right?
So that's referred to as a waltz.
Yes, that would be it. I come from a more avant-garde, abstract background, like musically, and my education and everything. And funny enough, I have never written a waltz in my life. And so when I was at this residency, I decided I would write a cute little waltz, and it would be purely like adorable. It was like adorable and dancey and very light and charming. And I was like, that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I went for.
Huh. It does sound different than stuff you've done before.
Right? It's very, very different.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so then how, like, initially and at what age, what sparked your interest in piano?
Yeah, so I started piano lessons. I actually can give you the exact date. I had my first piano
You have a
lesson.
date?
Yeah, October 23rd, 1997.
Okay.
That was when I first had my very, very first piano lesson.
What is it? October 23rd, 97?
Sorry? Yeah.
Okay.
That's the date. I remembered it because I found one of my old notebooks when I was a kid, and I looked at it, found the first date I ever had a lesson, and I just never forgot that. I have a horrible memory, but I remembered that, and that kind of stuck with me. But I started tinkering with keys when, I was a kid. I was musically inclined. Like, my parents, like my mom, played guitar. My dad jokes, and he's like, I play the kazoo. He can't do. But my grandpa was a choir singer, and like my mom's side of the family all is artists. Like one of my uncles an abstract artist, the other uncle is a virtuosic pianist and composer as well. Like, there's a lot of music in my family.
Yeah.
And we had a toy piano growing up, and I would just bash the crap out of it when I was a kid, but I loved it. And then eventually we got a hold of a Yamaha upright that I guess I'll talk about later as to why I kind of wish I still had it. But I would play on it as a kid, and my mom taught me a few songs, Heart and Soul and whatnot, the easy ones, and how to play the melody. And so then they're like, okay, well, let's get you some piano lessons. So I started doing it, and I fell in love with it. And then I was a teenager, and that was a rough patch of I was going to quit, or I didn't know. I was like, I want to play the saxophone or the upright bass. I was interested in other stuff. But at that point, I had gotten pretty good at the piano, and my mom was like, why would you do anything else? You actually just know how to do this already, so let's do that. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life in high school. I was going to go into history, actually, I think. Go into ancient history was a thing I was super into. But I went to a music festival, and I can't remember the name of it anymore. But I went to a music festival when I was a sophomore in high school. And it was my first time going to one of those music institutes, and I had the most fun. And I met a bunch of Juilliard prep kids who were studying at the prep college in New York City. Okay. And instead of being disheartened because they were way better than me, I was very inspired, and I was like, you know what, I love playing the piano, and if they can do this, then man, I can figure this out too. So when I got back, I started practicing like a crazy person. I was and that is to say, I'm a lot healthier in the way I practice now. But when I was in high school, I was the more hours the better, so I was clocking 4 or 5 hours a day. And just sitting there learning repertoire. I went to Tanglewood the year after when I was in high school, so that was kind of cool. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm getting better. But I suffered from performance anxiety all through college. I love playing the piano, but I really
not in front of people.
I was terrified to play in front of audiences. It was really weird that I just never got over that hump. But I love playing in front of people now. But yeah, there was a point in my life where I was terrified to play Beethoven, play anything, because I was I'm going to have a memory slip, I'm going to mess up, I'm going to do this. I was just constantly hampering myself.
When you perform now, how many times do you screw up?
Oh, all the time. But
no one notices.
No one noticed. Exactly. Yeah, it was a thing. I did not screw up in the piece I just played, by the way. But the that is actually a thing that I like got okay with, because one of the biggest lessons I learned from my piano teacher in my undergrad, she taught me to like be okay with imperfections. You are human. Like, you are going to make mistakes. And so it's about understanding the music, and it's about making a beautiful sound, or making the sound that you need to for the job. So my whole focus when I play is thinking about sound. And which helped me a lot with like going into avant-garde music and going into more contemporary performance practice, because I process noise as music, and that's how I use it as an expressive device. It's not something that's like foreign to me. It's something that's part of who I am, and like taking that idea of sound and how do we manipulate it, use it for expressive purposes, regardless of the genre, is what it keeps me excited to perform, but also like relieves a lot of the anxieties of what performance was for me before, which was don't make a mistake.
Yeah.
Now it's about just make the music worth it for the listener. Like, what does the audience want to hear or experience?
Wow. So you're practicing like 4 or 5 hours a day in high school?
Yeah, just about.
So what are you practicing? Like, what are you
now, or when I was
back then? Like,
sure.
are you like listening? Are you influenced by certain musicians and artists? Are you like just improvising? Are you listening to the radio? Because at this point, I think the radio was still popular.
Yeah, radio was a big thing, and
iTunes,
like all the top early iTunes,
like, iTunes. Yeah. Like, so what? As someone who lives beneath an apartment that's learning piano.
Oh gosh.
So
I'm so sorry.
It's a joy. It's really a joy. So they must have like 2 kids.
Oh.
Because there's a baby that's crying a lot, and then someone that's like every now and then practicing. It's like, oh, they're getting better.
That's amazing.
I actually like it. I enjoy it. But what are you occupying those hours of practice with?
Sure. And I guess I think this even can apply to today. I take my approach is very, very different now. But when I was growing up and figuring my life out and figuring out what I wanted to do, funny enough, I was terrified of improvisation. The idea of improvising was scary, because
you're also a teenager, right?
Yeah,
so
I was a teen.
Like,
I just wanted to play the music that I liked. I loved Rachmaninoff. I would probably say Rachmaninoff was big. Chopin. I went down that whole classical rabbit hole. I was like really into Beethoven and doing all of that, learning the classics because that's what I was told to learn and do. But like I was into it, and I was playing lots of fun repertoire. I think the biggest thing for me, I don't like competitions, but I did compete regularly in high school, and I did win a concerto competition. I played the Saint-Saëns piano concerto when I was a junior in high school with an orchestra, and that was amazing. Haven't done that again since then. I really don't like competing, but I did that, and that kind of told me that I was like, you know what, I do really like performance. But for me, the hard thing was, what do I do as a performer? I was still figuring that out, and I liked playing classical music, but I was like, in my brain, I think I had to become, there was something about society that was said, you have to become like a tournament classical pianist, like become one of those top guns who like goes to those internationals and does that for a living. And I'm like, that was terrifying. The whole idea of it was terrifying to me. I was like, I just want to play small, intimate spaces and share more intimate programming with people. But I didn't know that was a thing when I was in high school or college. Like I only thought it was play classical music and then become a teacher and then become a university professor.
Yeah.
And
like a pretty linear path.
Yeah, it was very linear. I was when I was in college, I was like, I'm gonna get a doctorate in music theory. I was like, I wanted to become a theory professor, because again, performance was such a hard thing for me to deal with. But then somewhere along the way, I started picking up composition, when I was at Boston University. I picked up composition. I spent 2 years there before I left because I couldn't afford it anymore because school's expensive. But I was there and I started lessons because of this composer named Kaleidoscopic, who I adore. She was my theory teacher. We actually keep in contact still. She's lovely. Seek her out. She's really interesting. I love her music. But Kaleidoscopic, and what happened was she kind of encouraged me to start writing more and was like, hey, I actually like your ideas and you actually you're writing cool, interesting music, and maybe this is a thing you start thinking about. So in my brain, who suffered from performance anxiety, was like, oh, if I become a composer, then I don't have to perform anymore. People do it for me. So I started doing that more, became a double major, and then left the school. And then took a year off, worked, and then moved to Chicago to finish up at DePaul University, got my composition degree, and essentially went to Roosevelt for my master's. The rest is history. Along that way, I started doing, at DePaul, I became the pianist for 20 Plus Ensemble and was introduced to avant-garde and contemporary music from Michael Lewansky, the conductor there. And so I started playing wild composers that I had never heard of who are alive today, or were considered contemporary, more abstract, that modern, really intense, hyper polyrhythmic, really complex music, and I fell in love with it.
So you heard the avant-garde and you're like,
yeah.
What is this? I like this stuff.
Yeah, and actually I should even reference, like, when I was in high school, I fell in love with composers like Ligeti, John Cage, George Crumb, like all those experimental ones that they teach you in history class. And so I was really into super weird music growing up. And I guess, yeah, I'll talk about more about my musical taste. It's all over the place these days, or even in high school. But I took a lot of that, but then put it away when I went to my undergrad. Like, there was a love for it, but I was always too intimidated by it to pursue it or understand it. But I do have John Cage's 433 hanged on. Like,
I see that. Yeah,
it's on the wall, and that's the first thing I learned about. And as a high schooler, I thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And moving forward, I didn't do any contemporary until I moved to Chicago and started having to play in the 20 Plus Ensemble. And so the first piece I ever played in that group was a piece by a composer named Salvatore Sciarrino, who's one of my favorite Italian avant-gardists. I recently played at a show I did at Constellation. I played his second piano sonata, which was a terrifying piece. I'll show you the score after. I'll show you what I mean. But I played that piece by him. And then I also played works by Laheman. I started learning about Rebecca Saunders, other kinds of composers. I got into just more abstract, like extended techniques on the piano, learning how to read graphic scores, learning how to do harmonics, plucking strings, muting strings, doing all sorts of weird stuff on the piano. But I felt comfortable for me, and I loved doing it, and it also was an outlet for me to be more expressive because I was really struggling with classical music at that time. But doing avant-garde stuff was really, really freeing for me because there's something about it because it's very abstract and most of the time atonal, like doesn't have a key. Didn't matter if I messed up. No one, like, you wouldn't know if I made a mistake.
Huh.
So that really kind of helped me a lot as getting more into it. So then when I went to Roosevelt, I was playing more piano and became a chamber pianist. I was in an ensemble called Ursa Ensemble for a very long time, and that really shaped how I learned to play with other people, and it was one of the most wonderful experiences and also really taught me to be more confident. And I played a lot of classical music there, so I got over my fear of Brahms, I got over my fear of Mozart, Schubert, and started enjoying the process of learning these more classical composers that we know, and just finally also started improvising more, and because I got church jobs, so I became a church musician, and they were like, we need prelude music, and I was like, I didn't learn anything, I didn't practice any music for prelude, so I started making things up.
Nice.
And people started really responding to me just improvising music, and eventually it became part of my creative process, actually, because when I was doing composition, I was taught very rigorous compositional techniques and practices. So like I did a lot of pre-compositional planning. I would have like charts, I'd have like equations, I'd have pitch class sets, all this stuff that's just like, how do you craft the perfect piece?
This is like when they on like TV shows, like the FBI goes in and they catch the serial killer, and they look, and he's got this huge like poster board with all these magazine clip outs and pinpoints.
I looked like a conspiracy theorist with all the stuff everywhere. This is gonna make the best piece. And so that's how I was taught. I mean, like, I'm very thankful for all the techniques and the ways of learning how more, in a way, academic composers, but also like the more abstract thinkers of the 20th century thought.
Okay.
And I use those approaches because I was really interested in noise. Rebecca Saunders is a composer who I absolutely adore and is one of my favorites. She's a British-born German composer who resides in Europe, and like her music kind of really inspired me to become more of a noise artist and focusing on the concept of noise and pitch. Yeah, and so that was a part of who I became. And then I also started doing actual noise improv gigs. So I have a toy piano, and I plugged it to a pedal chain, and I used it as a percussion instrument, and it became like a very weird thing. So I was doing a lot of just really out there stuff for a while. I once played a video game as part of a set. Like I literally plugged in my Nintendo DS to my amplifier and played a round of Smash Brothers while my other friend, she was improvising stuff over that.
Really?
Yeah. So like, you know, a DIY noise venue at like a small art gallery, make enough money for a beer. It's a good time.
So okay. So then how do you? So there's all this, practice and learning and influences. How then? Because now you're building up quite like I don't know what you call it, like a rap sheet or a resume, or you have like at least 2 albums that I know of, a few EPs, and you just wrote like another one in Montreal, and like
So how do we get there?
What is the creative process? I know, like, I went to a show recently. Was that December or January?
Which one?
At Space?
October.
Okay.
When I did that. No worries. Time is alive.
Time
is alive.
What is time?
We're 2.5 years in the pandemic. I don't even know.
So that was in Evanston, and it was a Space, and like, I mean, there were a lot of people there. There was like 200 people there.
Yeah,
and
I have filled the room.
And so he's up there on stage with this big piano, and I'm like, I was actually sitting against the wall, and the lighting was like, it's a really cool space.
It's space. It's a beautiful space.
It's called Space.
It's called Space.
It's Space. And you played the entire album, and I just like put my head on the wall, and I just like drifted away. And that album in particular is called Songs I Wrote on a Winter Night.
Pieces I Wrote on a Cold Winter Night. But pretty much. Yeah, I know. It's kind of convoluted. I won't lie. But Pieces I Wrote on a Cold Winter Night. So I'll fast track this whole thing here because I tangented. But anyway, so that whole, like this newer writing, essentially I'm in a newer writing style and a newer kind of more creative and free process at the moment, like in my writing, which is why I think things are just coming out very rapidly.
Well, that's another thing too I was curious about, is because like you're doing all this learning, and then now you're like just pumping stuff out.
Yeah. So I have to thank a little bit of I take a very intuitive approach now to writing. So when I said before I learned really rigorous compositional processes, eventually I started relying on my gut to work on these pieces. I had another teacher. It was funny. Like this will forever be ingrained in my mind. I bring a piece to her. She's like, I show it to her. She's like, "This is an amazing academic piece. I think you hate it." And I was like, okay. So that stuck with me, and there was a lot of rethinking I had to do. But eventually, it started to become this thing where I was like, okay, I have this idea. What if I just kind of trust my gut a little bit more about how to write it musically and expressively? I can get the idea that I want, but what if I rely on myself rather than all these graphs and charts?
Yeah.
So I started writing more pieces where I would be like, okay, I'm going to just kind of trust the flow of it. And it started working out great. And I took that approach. And as an improviser, I run this series called Music, Stillness, Solidarity. And I literally improvise for a full hour without stopping every Tuesday, 5:30 to 6:30 on Twitch, and now at St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Church in person. But I run for an hour, like without stopping. So I force myself to come up with material as I go. And I do have my I have my trusted gimmicks and things like that. Like improvisers have things that work for them, right? We have our list, our bag of tricks, and that kind of helps me with the process. So people started asking me like, when are you going to start writing this stuff down? Because I love listening to it. It's really expressive. It's really beautiful. It sounds like you. Why is this stuff not available for me to listen to? And I was like, you're right. So I went to Banff in 2019. I applied for a residency there to write a piano album of this kind of stuff. I started writing more minimal. I started shifting my style to polyrhythmic, minimalist, complex music, like writing beautiful lyrical things, but that's a little bit of a tinge of difficulty to it.
Yeah.
And I really started enjoying that, and it was really easy for me to write. I wrote the first piece in 2018. My wife dropped me off. Suzanne dropped me off at a coffee shop. Shout out to Suzanne, who actually started this whole thing of the people who really pushed it. She dropped me off at a coffee shop and said, figure it out. Because we did this minimalist concert together, and that was the first piece I ever wrote for this concert was in 2018. And she dropped me off at a shop and said, don't come home until it's done. So I wrote this piece, and like that piece, I brought it to Banff. People really responded to it. Next year, I go to Banff to write the rest of the album. And I wrote the whole thing in the mountains in 2 weeks. I wrote this entire piece in 2019. And then the pandemic happened, and I took time to really process and think. And what I was doing during the quarantine, I produced an album, which is the Cafe at the End of the World, which I saw. And
it's on Spotify. Yeah, give it a listen.
Please.
If you're looking for something to study to or to relax to, or just like casual meditation, put it on. Like I think in one of our last episodes, we had someone in Paris, and he talked about listening to Interstellar and Hans Zimmer, and put on some Jonathan Hannau.
Hey, thank you. And it's a lot of that same stuff. Like the pandemic kind of turned it into like, what if I just started making music for people to relax to and be more centered and be more allowing themselves to kind of escape, because reality is a bit rough at the moment. We can agree. So I started writing more peaceful music for me and for other people. And eventually, during COVID, I started recording my improvisations. I still ran my series, but I would just stream it over Twitch. And then I picked up some nicer microphones, started collecting clips. And so the Cafe at the End of the World, that album is all improvised clips. Like I just went through my streams and I would just pick sections of music that I liked. And then I would just take those clips and then I would take it into Logic and I manipulated them and did electronic stuff with it. So I was like, oh, I can time stretch this. I can add reverb here. I would just do fun things with it. So it was a really just fun, freeing project for me to do, which eventually culminated in an album. I was like, oh, I have an album. Might as well put it out. So I did that. I also recorded some songs I wrote for friends, and that was my first EP. Yeah. It's some short songs on Spotify, and then on Bandcamp it's called Songs Without Words, Volume 1. Okay. So it's a little convoluted, a little confusing, but you can find it on Spotify. It's for friends. And then obviously I wrote this bigger album, Pieces I Wrote on a Cold Winter Night. That album is available right now on Bandcamp. If you look up Scripps Records, or if you look up my name with Pieces and Winter, you will find it immediately on any Google search. My name is really easy to find, fortunately. But I wrote this album, applied for a grant. I got a D-Case grant in 2020 or 2021. 2021, I got a D-Case grant to record and release it. So I recorded it at Roosevelt University in Gons Hall with my friend Aaron Gottel, and put it out with Scripps Records and did a release show at Space, and that whole culmination really was like that night was like, I want to do this, like this is what I want to be doing with my life. It was so wonderful and such a beautiful experience, and like that shifting into this minimalist ambient style of writing has led me to a lot more collaborations recently, a lot more people being interested in finding out what I'm doing. Like, it's been very productive, and that's been inspiring me to put more stuff out.
That's when he started growing the hair longer.
And then the hair started growing longer.
Like, oh, now, shoot, I can do this.
I think part of it is, like, also I've always loved emo and punk music growing up, and I still listen to punk rock today, and that's, like, my most listened, like, genre is one of my big genres, and so I'm like, well, I'm not going to become a punk rocker anytime soon, as much as I want to, so I'll just write emo piano music. And but yeah, it's been a really fruitful and beautiful journey, and I am way happier now with the composition. So getting into that next thing is like, how do I use intuition? A lot of the way I write now is I think about what I want to do. Like, okay, so yesterday I wrote a piece that was in like C sharp minor, and it was a nocturne, and it was a little darker, and this and that, and like that. I'll like come up with a thing and be like, okay, I want to write a moody piece today. So
now, when you say write, are you like, do you play it and record it, and then think of the notes that you played, or do you write it and then you play it?
So it's a little bit of both, actually. Okay. So I like to start with improvisation. That's my dog Macy, by the way. I like to start with improvisation. So I'll kind of futz around on the piano with a glass of bourbon. I'll futz around on the piano, and I'll come up with a small motive or like kind of melodic idea that I really like, or like a chord progression. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can work with this. And then I'll write it down. And I actually, one of my biggest practices that has stuck with me, no matter what genre or what kind of music I've been writing, I always handwrite everything. So I handwrite my scores. I can even show you one right now if you'd like.
Yeah, let's bring one out here.
So hold on. I'll show the camera.
Yeah.
So this is one of the pieces that I wrote while I was in residence these last few weeks.
It looks like the Rosetta Stone. You know?
So I really love the practice of handwriting on paper, and for me that's personally a little bit more authentic for who I am. And then what I do is I put this into a computer so that it's legible for others. But when I first write a piece, it's always done by hand, and this is
probably what like classical artists used to do, right?
Yeah, everything it was just write it by hand. So it's I would come up with a motive or a little idea, which you see at the that first measure is like, oh, I improvised that and I kind of liked it and I stuck with it. And then I wrote it down and just started so when I was writing, I'll be at the piano, play a little bit. Oh, I like that. Write it down. And then as I progress through the piece, I'll come up with different sections, or I'll be like, oh, I have to change something here now. So I'll change to a B section or do something different to kind of give it a little life. Because I don't like being stagnant for too long. I like to keep the listener on their toes.
Now, what do you put more time into? The writing of your music or coming up with the titles of the songs that you write? You should see his titles. His titles are like
they're wild.
Like,
what do I do?
What would be one? It'd be I
really like the
staring out the window on a cold winter night. There are like long.
They're long and drawn
descriptive.
Out. Yeah, the pieces I wrote on a cold winter night. That one, the title of the album is long, but the pieces are short. Like one of them is Return, the other one's Mountain, Icicle. Very simple descriptors was what I went for with that one. But for the Cafe at the End of the World, that's the one that like is long and convoluted, and I'm actually a big fan of those titles. Let me pull up a few because I can't remember them, and they are kind of obnoxiously long.
It's funny. I like it. I dig it.
The first one's called. It actually kind of has a weird surrealist narrative. I love surrealism. That's one of my big actually influences artistically. But hello friend, what can I get for you? So it's kind of like you arrive at the cafe, and then boulders float along in the distance, staring out the window blankly. Coffee getting cold. The ocean is a peaceful place, don't you think? Outside, a train rolls by without making a sound. Like, I like doing weird, like, they don't make too much sense, but they kind of pique your interest.
As a listener, you don't know if, like, you spent an hour on that title or, like, 2 seconds. You know?
Yeah. He was like, did he just phone that in?
What's he going for there? You know, like, art critics spend, like, 2 days analyzing it.
Oh man, critics would hate to know that most of the time I just kind of trust my gut. I'm like, good enough.
I think that speaks to like true artists is like they just express themselves. They just put it out there.
It's freeing. Like I have unlocked something. I mean, like where we've kind of like led up to in this whole like talking about my creative process. I think I've laid it out kind of well. Let me know if there's a hole, but going eventually to the idea of trusting your intuition, trusting your gut, and trusting yourself as an artist to actually get the job done from point A to point B. Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to confidence in the end. Like I'm really happy with the way I'm writing, and I know that I can come up with an idea easily now because I've practiced this process of improvisation and intuitive practice for so long that I'm like, I come up with an idea and I stick with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Let's see it to the end. Because, again, like, better to put out music and be, like, actively, like, not hitting writer's block, but just being like, hey, I wrote this piece and I'm happy with it. I'll put it out into the world. And, like, being, okay, not everyone's going to love it. But that's not the point. It's just about being your authentic self. And I think that was the biggest hurdle for me, was becoming an authentic, or to myself, more authentic and more honest with myself as an artist and what I wanted to be doing, instead of listening to what people were telling me to do.
Yeah, that advice right there is worth like $1 billion.
Yeah, like do what makes you happy. If you are not happy and you're doing an art and you're miserable, you have to I feel like you have to rethink some things.
Yeah.
Because life it becomes difficult, right? Like it's hard to get stuff out. It's hard to trust yourself and be true to yourself.
So now you wrote this album about winter.
Yes.
So now are you gonna, that was just one season of the 4.
That's right.
I should explore the other seasons.
I am actually. Yep. I am intending to write 3 more albums of the seasons. And so for this past residency, that was just for an EP, which I'll talk about a little, but I will be headed to Avalock Farms in June to actually write the next season. Okay. Because that was my proposal.
So is this going to be summer now?
Yeah, summer. Because I was like, am I going in June or May? I'm going in June, so it'll be summer. So I will be working on a summer album, and then hopefully I'll get around to fall and eventually spring. So there is a trajectory, and each album will be about an hour long. So my grand culmination of a 4-hour-long performance one day will happen. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, that's
there will be breaks.
4 hours, yeah. Okay.
There will be breaks.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
There'll be breaks between seasons or something?
Probably. Yeah. I should. I want to personally play it 4 hours without stopping, but everyone is not me, so I will have breaks.
That's again going back to the serial killer conspiracy theorist. Like, I'm gonna do it in 4 hours
do this
straight.
Thing that no one wants, but I want to do. But yes, so there is a set in mind now for this larger project of mine, and that will be the 4 seasons.
That's gonna be exciting.
What
about some vinyl? I need some piano vinyl, man.
Vinyl will happen. That's like one of my dreams in life. Is
vinyl will happen.
Vinyl will happen. I promise. Although vinyl's in a shortage at the moment, so it'll take a few years.
I heard that. Yeah.
Well, but it will happen.
We're kind of wrapping up here on our time. as we go out, I would love for you to play some music after I ask you, what are you most excited for in the next 2 years?
What am I the most excited for? I am excited to be working with this new record label that I recently signed with. They're called Little Symphony Records, and I joined their roster recently, and that's actually I was writing an EP at Orford Musique for them. That was my recent residency was writing this 5 or 6 track EP. I ended up writing 7 pieces, so I got to kind of pick and choose now.
When you say residency, what exactly do you mean by that?
A residency is essentially it's a space that's given to artists to allow them to work on their creative process without interruptions. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner is sorted out for me. Like, I just go to the cafeteria, the dining hall, they have it already made. They house me, they give me a place to sleep. I have my own studio with a piano in it with a desk, and I can lock the door and I can just sit there for hours and just write music. I tell in my emails I'm away, don't bother me. Yeah. And I sort out my work, but it's a space, and normally they're in beautiful areas and environments. Like Orford is in a national park in Quebec, in a suburb called Magog outside of Montreal, and I was just in nature, and I could just walk around in the nature preserve, get inspired by the world, and then go to my studio and write a piece. Same thing with like going to Banff, the Center for the Arts, and Avaloq is also a beautiful place. But like, it gives you a world where you don't have to go to meetings or anything. It just gives you the space to work on yourself as an artist. And I love residencies for that because I'm very self-motivated. So you put me in a place where no one's going to bother me, I will write a whole album. Yeah. Guaranteed.
And you have.
So far. And I have, yeah.
Yeah. Well, why don't you play some stuff for us to close out our podcast episode?
Sure. So this one is called Waves at the Beach. This one's very chill. this is what you would have heard this piece.
Okay.
I think it's. I'll play the one that it's the crowd favorite. Let's do that. It's Mountain.
Give the people what they want.
This is the one that I love to play the most, and also it's very dense. that's mountain.
Mountain.
Yes. All right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank
This
you
has
for
been
having me. This was
fantastic.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me in your space.
Of
And
course. Well, you're welcome anytime.